I found the document by accident while cleaning out Dad's home office. Just a single sheet of paper, really. But seeing Aunt Zuriel's signature next to that astronomical sum made my blood run cold. I'm Eleanor, by the way, and this is how I discovered my family's darkest secret, starting with a wedding invitation that would change everything. Ellie, darling, we simply must discuss Savannah's wedding arrangements. Aunt Zuriel's voice dripped honey over the phone, but I knew better. That tone meant trouble. You've done so well with your business. It's time to give back to the family. I pressed my fingers against my temple, already feeling a headache coming on. What exactly are you suggesting, Aunt Zuriel? Well, as the most financially successful member of our family, we thought you'd want to contribute to Savannah's special day. The venue alone is running us nearly 6 figures. I nearly choked on my coffee. 6 figures? For a venue? It's the Hamilton Estate, darling. Savannah has always dreamed of getting married there. And since you've been so blessed, let me get this straight. I cut in, my voice sharp. You want me to fund my cousin's wedding? The same cousin who hasn't spoken to me in 3 years except to comment cute on my Instagram posts? Don't be difficult, Eleanor. Family helps family. Your father agrees with me completely. Of course he did. Dad hadn't made a decision without Aunt Zuriel's approval since Mom died 12 years ago. I'm sorry, but no. I worked hard for my money. I'm not funding an extravagant wedding for someone who barely acknowledges my existence. The honey in her voice crystallized to ice. I see. Well, I'll be sure to let everyone know about your decision. The line went dead before I could respond. I knew what would follow. The passive-aggressive family group chat messages, the disappointed calls from Dad, the guilt-tripping from my sister, Lacey. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Lacey, please tell me you didn't just refuse to help with Savannah's wedding. She said without preamble, "Hello to you too, sis." Ellie, come on. You know how Aunt Zuriel gets. Just throw some money at it and keep the peace. I stood up from my desk, pacing my home office. Why is it always about keeping the peace? Why am I always the one who has to give in? Because you're the one who can afford to. Lacey's voice rose. Some of us are still struggling to make rent. That's exactly my point. I struggled for years building my business while Savannah was getting her 4th degree funded by Aunt Zuriel. Now suddenly, I'm supposed to bankroll her dream wedding? You're being selfish. No, I'm being reasonable. I stopped pacing, my eye catching on Dad's office door across the hall. I'd been helping him organize since he mentioned selling the house. Look, I need to go. I'm at Dad's place sorting through papers. After hanging up, I pushed open the office door, the familiar scent of old books and leather hitting me. That's when I saw it. A paper had slipped partially under the ancient filing cabinet. I wouldn't have noticed it if the corner hadn't been sticking out. Pulling it free, I found myself staring at what looked like a bank statement. But the numbers? They didn't make sense. According to this, Aunt Zuriel had accessed over $2 million from what appeared to be a family trust fund, money I'd never known existed. The date on the document was from just after Mom died. My phone buzzed again. Dad. Eleanor, honey, about Savannah's wedding. Dad? I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I need to ask you something. What do you know about a family trust fund? The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, barely above a whisper, "Where did you find that?" So it's real? The $2 million Aunt Zuriel took? Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. Dad's voice shook. Don't mention this to anyone, especially not your aunt. Some things are better left in the past. But as I stared at the damning evidence in my hands, I knew this was just the beginning. They wanted me to fund a wedding? Fine. But first, I was going to uncover exactly what happened to those millions, and why nobody had ever thought to mention them to me. The wedding invitation sat on my desk, mocking me with its gold-foiled elegance. Well, Aunt Zuriel, you wanted me involved in this wedding? Be careful what you wish for. You're sure about this? Gregory leaned back in his chair, frowning at the document I'd spread across his desk. As my company's financial advisor, he'd become one of my most trusted confidants over the years. 2 million is a lot of money to just disappear. Look at the signature, I pointed. That's definitely Aunt Zuriel's. And the date, it's exactly 2 weeks after Mom's funeral. He pulled out his reading glasses, examining the paper more closely. Your mother's death. Was it unexpected? Car accident. The words still tasted bitter. At least, that's what we were told. Dad was a mess afterward, basically handed everything over to Aunt Zuriel to handle. Including the finances, Gregory murmured, more to himself than to me. He looked up suddenly. Give me a few days. I know some people who can dig deeper into this. My phone buzzed. Another message from Lacey. Family dinner tonight. Don't you dare skip this one. I showed Gregory the text. Want to bet this is an ambush about the wedding? Go, he said, carefully folding the document. Keep them thinking everything's normal while I look into this. The family home looked exactly as it always had. Pristine lawn, perfect flowers, and enough tension in the air to power a small city. Savannah's car was already in the driveway. Eleanor, Aunt Zuriel's voice carried across the front yard as I got out of my car. How nice of you to join us. Inside, Savannah sat at the dining room table, surrounded by wedding magazines. She barely glanced up as I entered. Oh, hi, Eleanor. Have you reconsidered about the wedding? I wasn't aware there was anything to reconsider. I took a seat across from her, noting how Aunt Zuriel hovered nearby. My answer hasn't changed. But the Hamilton estate, Savannah whined. It's perfect, and they need the deposit by next week. Then I suggest you find a more affordable venue. Aunt Zuriel's hand came down hard on the table. That's enough. Eleanor, may I speak with you in private? She practically dragged me into Dad's office, shutting the door behind us. Listen here, you ungrateful child. After everything this family has done for you, what exactly has this family done for me? I interrupted, my voice low but firm. Because from where I'm standing, I built my business alone while you poured money into Savannah's endless education. Is that what this is about? Jealousy? My phone vibrated in my pocket. Gregory. I ignored it. No, Aunt Zuriel, this is about fairness. And speaking of money, I watched her face carefully. Whatever happened to Mom's trust fund? She went very still. What trust fund? The one you accessed 2 weeks after she died. $2 million. That's a lot of money to disappear without a trace. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. I have no idea what you're talking about. Your mother had no such fund. Really? Because I found the document with your signature. Before she could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time I checked it. Gregory. Urgent. Found something big. Offshore account in Cayman Islands. Call me ASAP. This conversation isn't over, I told Aunt Zuriel, moving toward the door. She grabbed my arm. Eleanor, wait. Perhaps we can discuss this. Come to an arrangement. An arrangement? About the wedding. Maybe if you helped with the venue, we could ensure certain old documents remain private. I stared at her, disgusted. Are you trying to blackmail me into paying for the wedding? I'm trying to protect this family, she hissed. Some things are better left in the past. Dad's exact words. What were they so desperate to hide? Eleanor? Lacey's voice called from the dining room. Where did you go? We'll finish this later, Aunt Zuriel said, straightening her blouse. And Eleanor, remember, family loyalty goes both ways. I waited until she left before calling Gregory. Eleanor, you're not going to believe this, he said without preamble. That money? It wasn't just transferred once. There have been regular deposits to an offshore account for the past 12 years. Most recent one was last month. My hands started shaking. How much? Total? Close to 5 million by now. And here's the kicker. The account name is Montgomery Holdings. Montgomery, Aunt Zuriel's married name. There's more, Gregory continued. I found some old insurance documents. Your mother's accident. Eleanor, there was a 7-figure life insurance policy, paid out to Zuriel Montgomery as trustee. The room seemed to spin, all these years of struggling, of building my business from nothing, while Aunt Zuriel sat on millions, our family's millions. Eleanor? Gregory's voice softened. What do you want to do? I thought about Savannah's entitled demands, Dad's silence, Aunt Zuriel's threats. Keep digging, I said. I want everything. The family pressure intensified over the next week. Constant calls, guilt-tripping texts, even a tearful visit from Savannah herself. But it was Lacey showing up at my door at midnight that finally broke the pattern. I need a drink, she announced, pushing past me into my apartment. Her mascara was smeared, and she clutched her purse like a lifeline. I poured us both a glass of wine. What happened? Aunt Zuriel happened. Lacey took a long sip. She came by my place today, started asking weird questions about you, about what you've been saying to me. What kind of questions? About Mom, mostly, and money. She set down her glass hard enough to slosh wine onto my coffee table. She offered to help with my rent if I'd keep an eye on you. I felt my jaw clench. And I told her to shove it. Lacey's eyes filled with tears. But Ellie, there's something else. Something I should have told you years ago. I sat down beside her, my heart pounding. What? Remember when I was trying to start my photography business right after college? She wouldn't meet my eyes. I went to Aunt Zuriel for a loan. She agreed, but then she made me sign these papers. I didn't really read them. I was so desperate. What papers, Lacey? I think? I think they were about Mom's estate, some kind of waiver of rights. She wiped her eyes. The business failed anyway, and Aunt Zuriel held that loan over my head for years. But tonight, when she tried to bribe me again, something clicked. Why does she have so much money to throw around? I got up and retrieved the trust fund document from my office. Lacey's hands shook as she read it. 2 million? She whispered. But we struggled so much after Mom died. You worked 3 jobs to start your business. I had to drop out of art school. It gets worse. I told her about Gregory's discovery of the offshore account and the insurance policy. Lacey cut herself off, standing up suddenly. We need to check Mom's old things, now. It's midnight. Dad's at his poker game. He won't be home for hours. We need to look while Aunt Zuriel isn't hovering around. 20 minutes later, we were in Mom's old craft room, now used for storage. Lacey went straight to the back corner, pulling out a dusty box. Mom's journals, she explained. I found them years ago but never read them. It felt too private then. We spent the next hour flipping through pages of our mother's elegant handwriting. Most entries were ordinary, daily life, concerns about us kids, little observations about the world. Then I found it. Listen to this, I said, reading aloud. Zuriel's been asking about the trust again. Says Norman's business is in trouble, needs capital. I can't tell if she's lying. She always was good at that. But I made that trust for the girl's future. I won't let her touch it. I looked at the date. This was 3 weeks before the accident. Lacey grabbed the journal. There's more. Found discrepancies in the business accounts today. Large transfers I can't trace. When I asked Zuriel about them, she got defensive. Something's not right. Meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to... She turned the page. That's the last entry. My phone rang, making us both jump. Gregory, Eleanor, I found something disturbing. Those insurance documents? There was an investigation into your mother's accident, but it was suddenly dropped. The detective in charge received a large payment to an offshore account 2 days later. The journal slipped from my hands. That's not all, Gregory continued. I've been tracking the money trail. Most of those millions, they've been funding Savannah's lifestyle, designer clothes, luxury cars, that string of failed businesses she started. But there's a pattern of smaller payments, too, to people who might ask questions. Like the detective, I said numbly. Exactly, Eleanor. I think this goes deeper than simple embezzlement. Lacey was still reading the journal, her face getting paler by the page. Ellie, she interrupted, look at this. She pointed to a loose paper tucked into the binding, a handwritten letter. If anything happens to me, I read aloud, the truth is in the blue box. Love, Mom. Lacey and I stared at each other. The blue music box, she whispered. The one Mom always kept locked. Aunt Zuriel took it after the funeral, said it was worthless. Where is it now? In her house, in that cabinet of collectibles she never lets anyone touch. I spoke into the phone. Gregory, we need to get into Aunt Zuriel's house. Eleanor, his voice was worried. Be careful. People who pay off detectives? I know. I looked at Lacey, saw my own determination reflected in her eyes. But Mom tried to warn us. It's time we found out why. I found Dad in his usual spot, the back porch, nursing a whiskey, staring at Mom's old garden. The journals felt heavy in my bag as I sat beside him. You knew, didn't you? I kept my voice gentle, but he flinched anyway. About the money, about all of it. He took a long drink before answering. Your mother never trusted Zuriel with money, said she was too creative with numbers. Is that what we're calling fraud now? Creative? Eleanor? No. I pulled out Mom's journal. I found these. She knew something was wrong with the business accounts. She was going to meet a lawyer. I paused, watching his face. The next day, she died. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the porch. Don't. Please. The detective who investigated her accident got a payoff, Dad. An offshore payment, just like the millions Aunt Zuriel's been hiding all these years. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't know, not at first. When did you find out? About a year after your mother. His voice cracked. I found some papers like you did. When I confronted Zuriel, she had explanations, said your mother had been embezzling, that she'd fixed everything to protect the family name. And you believed her? The words came out sharper than I intended. I didn't want to believe anything else. He looked at me finally, eyes red. If what you're suggesting is true, if my own sister, show me the papers. He led me to his office, hands shaking as he opened a hidden safe behind a painting. I kept copies, never knew why, maybe part of me. The documents were damning, not just of Aunt Zuriel's theft, but of her elaborate cover-up. Transfer records, falsified statements, even a letter from Mom's lawyer about scheduling an urgent meeting that never happened. All these years, I said quietly, while Lacey and I struggled, while you remortgaged the house. Aunt Zuriel had millions of our money, and you said nothing. She's still my sister. And Mom was your wife. The words exploded out of me. We were your daughters. We needed you to fight for us. A noise from the doorway made us both turn. Lacey stood there, tears streaming down her face. Is it true? She asked Dad. Did you know about the money? He couldn't meet her eyes. Lacey, honey. My phone buzzed. A text from Gregory. Urgent. Just found email correspondence between Zuriel and the mechanic who worked on your mom's car the week before the accident. Call me now. Before I could process that, Another message popped up, this one from an unknown number. Stop digging. Some questions shouldn't be answered. I showed both messages to Dad. The color drained from his face. The mechanic, he whispered. I remember. Your mother complained about the brakes feeling strange. Zuriel recommended her personal mechanic. Lacey made a choking sound. Are you saying Aunt Zuriel might have? We need that blue music box, I cut in. The one Mom mentioned in her letter. It's in Aunt Zuriel's house. Dad stood up suddenly. I have a key to Zuriel's house for emergencies. Dad, no, Lacey protested. If she finds out, she's at her bridge club every Thursday afternoon, he said, moving to his desk. For years, I've kept quiet, let her control everything. But if my sister had anything to do with your mother's, he pulled out a key ring, hands steadier now. It's time I chose my daughters. My phone buzzed again. Gregory, don't respond to any threats. I'm documenting everything. But Eleanor, be careful. These people play for keeps. I looked at Dad, still holding the key like it might burn him. At Lacey, wiping tears but standing straighter. At Mom's journal, full of warnings she'd tried to leave us. Tomorrow's Thursday, I said. We go in, find the box, get out. No one needs to know. And then what? Lacey asked. I thought about Savannah's wedding, now just weeks away. About Aunt Zuriel's smug demands and threats. About 12 years of struggling while she lived off our mother's money. Then we get justice, I said. For Mom, for all of us. Dad nodded slowly, placing the key in my hand. Your mother would be proud of you both. She always said truth finds its way to light. Like water, Lacey whispered, quoting Mom's favorite saying. It always finds a crack to flow through. Tomorrow, we'd find more than cracks. We'd blow the whole dam wide open. The key trembled in my hand as we stood at Aunt Zuriel's back door. Thursday afternoon, right on schedule, we'd watched her luxury sedan pull away for Bridge Club. 15 minutes, Gregory reminded us through the phone's speaker. He'd insisted on staying connected. Any longer and we risk her coming back. The lock clicked open. Lacey grabbed my arm. Wait, security system. Dad stepped forward, punching in the code. She never changes it. Our mother's birthday. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Aunt Zuriel's house was exactly what you'd expect. Expensive, immaculate, and cold. The cabinet of collectibles dominated her formal living room, dozens of precious trinkets displayed behind glass. There, Lacey pointed. Top shelf, far right. Mom's blue music box sat exactly where Lacey remembered, gathering dust among crystal figurines. The cabinet was locked. Now what? Lacey whispered. I pulled out the ring of keys Dad had given me. She keeps everything, he'd said, never throws away a single key. The third key fit. 10 minutes, Gregory warned. The music box was heavier than I remembered. No key in sight. Here, Dad pulled out his wallet, extracting a small key from behind his credit cards. Your mother gave me this, said to keep it safe. My hands shook as I inserted the key. The lid opened with a familiar melody, Mom's favorite lullaby. Inside, beneath a stack of old photos, we found a USB drive and a sealed envelope with "For my daughters," written in Mom's handwriting. 7 minutes, Gregory said. You need to... He cut off abruptly as the sound of a car door slamming echoed from outside. She's back, Lacey hissed. Bridge Club must have canceled. Dad grabbed the USB and envelope, stuffing them in his pocket. Put the box back, exactly as it was. I closed the cabinet just as keys jingled in the front door. We rushed toward the back, but Aunt Zuriel's voice rang out. Hello? Is someone here? Footsteps approached the living room. Dad pushed us toward the kitchen. Go, I'll handle her. Dad, go. We slipped out the back door just as we heard Aunt Zuriel's surprised. Norman, what are you doing here? Lacey and I didn't stop running until we reached my car, parked 2 blocks away. Gregory was still on the line. Eleanor, what happened? We got it, I gasped. But Dad, he stayed behind. Smart move, Gregory said. He can explain his presence without raising suspicion. You two couldn't. My phone dinged with a text from Dad. All clear. Told her I was dropping off wedding RSVPs, meeting you at your place. 20 minutes later, we huddled around my dining room table. The USB drive contained exactly what we'd suspected: financial records, emails, and a video file of Mom speaking directly to camera. My darling girls. Mom's face filled the screen, looking exactly as I remembered. If you're watching this, something has happened to me. I've discovered serious financial irregularities in the family business. Your Aunt Zuriel has been embezzling funds for years, using offshore accounts and false documentation. I'm meeting with lawyers tomorrow, but I'm afraid. Strange things have been happening. My car's been acting weird. I've received threatening notes. If anything happens to me, take this evidence to the authorities. Protect yourselves, and know that I love you both so much. The video ended. Lacey was sobbing. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years. There's more, Gregory said, examining the financial records. These show systematic theft going back decades. But this is the smoking gun. He pointed to a series of transfers. Money from your mother's accounts to the mechanic who worked on her car, then to the detective, all traced back to Zuriel's offshore account. She killed her, Dad whispered. My own sister murdered my wife. My phone buzzed. Aunt Zuriel, we need to talk, now, about what you took from my house. Another message followed. Don't do anything rash, Eleanor. Think about the family, about Savannah's wedding, about your father's reputation. She knows, Lacey said. Good, I replied, surprising everyone. Let her worry. Let her wonder what we found, what we know. What's our next move? Gregory asked. I thought about Mom's video, about years of struggle, about Aunt Zuriel's smug manipulation. Savannah's wedding is in 2 weeks, I said. Everyone will be there. Family, friends, business associates, the perfect audience. Eleanor, Dad warned, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking. She used our mother's funeral to steal our inheritance, I cut in. It seems fitting to use her daughter's wedding to expose the truth. My phone buzzed again. Aunt Zuriel. Last chance, Eleanor. Name your price. I showed them the message, then typed my reply. You're right, Aunt Zuriel. Family helps family. See you at the wedding. You're really going through with this? Gregory asked, adjusting my dress strap at the wedding rehearsal dinner. We'd decided to attend as a couple to avoid suspicion, though the way he looked at me suggested it wasn't entirely an act. Watch Aunt Zuriel, I whispered. She hasn't taken her eyes off us all evening. Sure enough, my aunt sat at the head table, pretending to listen to the wedding planner while shooting nervous glances our way. The past 2 weeks of silence had clearly unnerved her. Eleanor, Savannah's voice cut through the crowd. I can't believe you actually came. And who's this? My date, Gregory. I smiled sweetly. I decided to contribute to your wedding after all. I'm preparing quite the surprise. Savannah squealed, missing the tension in my voice. I knew you'd come around. Did you hear that, Mom? Eleanor's going to help. Aunt Zuriel's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. How generous of her. Oh, it's the least I can do for family. I met her gaze. Mom always said family was everything. The glass shook slightly in her hand. Later, as guests mingled around the restaurant's bar, Lacey pulled me aside. Logan's asking questions. Savannah's fiancé? About what? He overheard Dad on the phone with his lawyer. He's worried about the family's financial situation. I glanced at Logan across the room. handsome, successful, and completely unaware he was marrying into a family built on murder and theft. Should we warn him? Lacey asked. He'll find out tomorrow with everyone else. Eleanor. Dad appeared beside us, his face grave. Zuriel's asking to speak with you. In private. Perfect timing. I pulled out my phone, starting the recording app. Where? The restaurant's wine cellar. But be careful. I've got this. I squeezed his hand. Gregory? He nodded, positioning himself near the cellar entrance as I descended the stairs. Aunt Zuriel waited between racks of expensive wines, looking oddly vulnerable in the dim light. Name your price, she said without preamble. Excuse me? For whatever you found in that music box, whatever you think you know. She opened her designer purse. I can write a check right now. Like the check you wrote to Mom's mechanic? She stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. Or the detective? How much does it cost to cover up a murder these days? Murder? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Your mother's death was an accident. Was it? Because we have proof of payments to the mechanic who tampered with her brakes, proof of millions stolen from her accounts, proof of your offshore holdings. I stepped closer. We even have Mom's video testimony. The color drained from her face. You're bluffing. Wanna bet Savannah's perfect wedding on that? You wouldn't dare. Her voice turned harsh. Think about what this would do to the family, to your father, to Savannah's big day. Like you thought about us? While we struggled, while Lacey dropped out of school, while Dad remortgaged his house, you lived off Mom's money. Money meant for us. I deserved that money. The words exploded from her. I built that business with your father, while your mother played artist and homemaker. Then she started asking questions, threatening to expose everything. My phone kept recording as Aunt Zuriel's careful facade cracked. She would have ruined everything, she continued. The business, our reputation, Savannah's future. I couldn't let that happen. So you had her killed. She flinched. I protected this family. Everything I did was for... Save it for tomorrow, I cut in, turning toward the stairs. Tomorrow? At the wedding, when everyone learns the truth. I'll stop you, she called after me. I've done it before. I turned back, letting her see my phone. Thanks for the confession, Aunt Zuriel. It'll go great with Mom's video. Her face contorted. You little... Everything okay down here? Gregory's voice carried from the top of the stairs. Perfect, I replied, climbing up. Just finalizing my wedding contribution. Back in the main room, Lacey and Dad waited anxiously. Did you get it? Lacey whispered. I played them a snippet of the recording. Dad closed his eyes, tears sliding down his cheeks. What now? Gregory asked, his hand finding mine. Now we go home and prepare for tomorrow. I watched Aunt Zuriel emerge from the cellar, her perfect mask back in place as she fussed over Savannah's seating arrangements. Mom always said weddings were about families coming together. Time to show everyone exactly what kind of family we really are. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Last warning, back off or face the consequences. I deleted it without replying. Tomorrow, the only consequences would be Aunt Zuriel's to face. The Hamilton estate glittered with fairy lights as guests filed into the grand ballroom. Aunt Zuriel had spared no expense, our expense technically, on Savannah's perfect day. Everything's ready, Gregory whispered, squeezing my hand. He'd set up the audio-visual equipment under the guise of preparing a wedding slideshow. Just say the word. I watched Aunt Zuriel flutter around the room, checking last-minute details. She'd been avoiding my eyes all morning, but I caught her nervous glances toward the presentation screen. Eleanor! Savannah appeared in a whirlwind of white tulle. Where's your surprise? You promised. After the ceremony, I assured her. Trust me, no one will forget it. The wedding proceeded like a fairy tale. Savannah floated down the aisle while Logan beamed. Aunt Zuriel dabbed at her eyes with an expensive handkerchief. Dad sat rigid beside me, his face a mask of barely contained emotion. Then came the reception. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced, before the first dance, we have a special presentation from the bride's cousin, Eleanor. Aunt Zuriel half rose from her seat. Wait, I stepped to the microphone. Family means everything to us, I began, my voice steady. So I wanted to share some recently discovered family history. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered to life. Mom's face appeared, 12 years younger but unmistakable. Several guests gasped. My darling girls, her recorded voice filled the ballroom. If you're watching this, something has happened to me. I watched Aunt Zuriel's face as Mom detailed the financial theft. The color drained from her cheeks when the evidence appeared. Bank statements, transfer records, emails about brake tampering. Then came last night's recording. I deserved that money, Aunt Zuriel's voice rang out. I couldn't let her expose everything. The room erupted in murmurs. Savannah stood frozen, her perfect makeup streaking with tears. Logan wrapped an arm around her, his lawyer's mind clearly processing the implications. Security! Aunt Zuriel shouted, standing. Stop this immediately. Security's been informed, Gregory called out, along with the police. As if on cue, blue lights flashed outside the estate's windows. You're lying, Aunt Zuriel snarled, but her voice shook. This is all fabricated. Like the accident report? Dad stood, his quiet voice carrying across the stunned room. Like the detective's investigation? Like the mechanic's sudden retirement to Florida? Norman, please, she pleaded. Think about what you're doing to this family. You killed my wife. His words fell like stones in water. You stole from my daughters. You are not my family. Savannah stumbled forward. Mom, what did you do? Everything I did was for you. Aunt Zuriel reached for her daughter. To secure your future, to give you the life you deserved. With blood money? Savannah recoiled. With Aunt Sarah's life? Mrs. Montgomery? A detective appeared at the ballroom entrance. We need you to come with us. This is ridiculous. She backed away. You have no proof. Actually, Gregory stepped forward. We have 12 years of financial records, witness statements from the mechanic and detective, both willing to talk in exchange for deals, and your own recorded confession. Plus Mom's video testimony, Lacey added, her voice strong. Recorded the day before you had her killed. The detective moved closer. Ma'am, please don't make this more difficult. Aunt Zuriel bolted. She made it halfway to the side exit before security caught her. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed back at me. You ungrateful brat, after everything I did for this family. You did nothing for this family, I cut in, my voice carrying over her protests. You destroyed it for money, for control, for your own selfish desires. The ballroom sat in shocked silence as police escorted her out. Savannah collapsed into Logan's arms, her dream wedding transformed into a nightmare. Dad stood stone-faced, watching his sister's departure. Lacey gripped my hand, both of us fighting tears. I'm so sorry, I told the stunned guests. But Mom always said truth finds its way to light, like water through cracks. Through cracks, Dad echoed softly, and several old family friends nodded, remembering Mom's favorite saying. As the police lights faded into the distance, Gregory wrapped an arm around my waist. You okay? I looked at my shattered family, Dad's quiet strength, Lacey's fierce loyalty, even Savannah's dawning comprehension of her mother's true nature. No, I answered honestly, but we will be, because that's what Mom would have wanted, not revenge, but justice, not destruction, but truth. And as the last rays of sunset painted the Hamilton estate in golden light, I felt her presence, finally at peace. The morning sun streamed through Mom's craft room windows as I sorted through boxes with Savannah. She'd shown up at dawn, still in yesterday's wedding dress, asking to help clean out the family home. I found more photos, she said, pulling out an album. Look at this one. You, me, and Lacey at the beach. Before everything. Before your mom turned us against each other. I finished gently. She traced the photo's edge. I keep thinking about all those times she told me I deserved the best. That Eleanor's just jealous. That Lacey's not ambitious enough. Her voice cracked. It was all built on Aunt Sarah's death. The police called this morning, I told her. Your mom's talking, trying to cut a deal. Good. Savannah's voice hardened. Let her talk. Let her face everything she did. The doorbell rang. Logan stood outside, looking exhausted but determined. I've been up all night, he said, stepping inside, going through the financial records Gregory sent over. The extent of the fraud. He shook his head. But I think I found a way to make things right. Dad appeared from his office. What do you mean? The money can be traced, recovered. It'll take time, but as a corporate lawyer, I can help navigate the legal process. He took Savannah's hand. If you'll let me. You still want to marry me? She whispered. After all this? I want to marry you, not your mother's crimes. He smiled slightly. Maybe something smaller than yesterday's event? A knock at the door revealed Gregory, carrying coffee and pastries. Thought everyone could use breakfast. Also, I have news. We gathered in the kitchen as he spread out documents. The offshore accounts are frozen. The insurance company's reopening the investigation into Sarah's death. And, he pulled out a letter, the Family Business Board wants to talk about reinstating Norman as CEO. Dad stared at the letter. I don't know if I can. You can, Lacey said from the doorway. She carried a familiar blue box. Look what I found in Mom's things. Inside the music box lay another envelope we'd missed, marked for Norman. Dad's hands shook as he read Mom's letter. My dearest Norman, if you're reading this, stay strong. The business was your dream before Zuriel twisted it. Don't let her take that from you, too. Lead with honesty, like you always wanted to. She knew, I realized. She knew you weren't part of Aunt Zuriel's schemes. The board meeting's next week, Gregory said. I'll help prepare the financial recovery plan. We all will, Logan added. As a family. Savannah wiped her eyes. Can we use Mom's stolen money to help people? Set up a foundation in Aunt Sarah's name? Already working on it, Gregory smiled. Eleanor had the same idea. The doorbell rang again. This time it was the detective. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Zuriel's given us everything. The mechanic, the cover-up, all of it. She'll be going away for a long time. And the money? I asked. Recovery process starts today. You'll need good lawyers. We've got that covered, Logan and Gregory said together. After the detective left, we sat in Mom's garden, sharing coffee and memories. The morning sun caught the wind chimes she'd loved, creating music from light. I keep thinking about karma, Lacey mused. How everything Aunt Zuriel did to control us just led to this moment, to us being stronger together. Mom would have loved that, I said, the truth setting us free. Speaking of truth, Gregory took my hand. Remember our first fake date at the rehearsal dinner? I'd like to make it real. Maybe start with coffee. Dad chuckled, his first real laugh in days. Sarah always said you two would end up together. She saw things clearly. Unlike some people, Savannah added, then bit her lip. Sorry, too soon for jokes about Mom? No, I squeezed her hand. We need to be able to talk about it, all of it. And then move forward, Logan said. Together. Dad stood, looking at Mom's garden. Sarah loved this place, said every flower had its season. He touched a blooming rose. Maybe it's our season now, to bloom again. Without the poison of secrets, Lacey added, or the weight of stolen money, Savannah said, or the fear of speaking truth, I finished. Gregory raised his coffee cup. To Sarah, who taught us that family isn't about control or money. To Mom, we echoed, who showed us that truth, like water, always finds its way. The wind chimes sang in harmony, and somewhere I knew Mom was smiling. Her garden would bloom again, nourished by truth instead of lies, by love instead of fear, and this time we'd tend it together.